the latest What's Working at Work, where I bring together three amazing experts with different perspectives to talk to me and to talk to you. So I am, for those of you who might not know me, I am Dana Zellers. I am an executive and leadership coach, team facilitator and trainer and speaker. And I work with those busy professionals who keep working hard and yet something is not translating. So whether that's one-on-one or with teams, I can come in and figure out how to be more effective without adding more hours. I would like to introduce you to my amazing panelists. If each of you could share a little bit about yourselves. Luann.
Sure. Luann Connor, and I am the founder and CEO of Sagacious Think and help companies scale with structure. So that's ensuring that scaling companies know where their weaknesses are and their strengths and can leverage them appropriately in order to scale and succeed in their goals.
Love it. Love it. Roy?
Yes, Roy Vela, outside of Boston, and my company is called Next Labs, and we are building at the convergence of this, that many, if not most meetings are happening in little windows on screens. And regardless, they're being transcribed. You should always assume you're being transcribed right now.
Always.
And behavioral science, behavioral dynamics. And we are able to apply 75, 80 years of behavioral science to all of our interactions and look inside, see what's working, see what's not working, and do something about it.
I love it. Bobby?
Hi, everybody. I'm Bobby. I am a 5-time TEDx speaker and Inc. Magazine Top 100 Leadership Speaker. I'm also a 2-time LinkedIn Top Voice. I have been a keynote speaker for the last 25 years. I've done 1,000 keynotes and workshops across 4 continents, mostly talking initially about soft skill leadership, but eventually became known as a personal branding expert. Then I became known as a digital marketing expert and influence expert. And now I talk a lot about vulnerable storytelling, how to leverage AI, how to build business, how to build for small business, how to be more authentic with your connection, putting the human in everything that I'm trying to do. And, in addition to doing keynotes and workshops, I help people land TEDx Talks. I also help small business owners grow and get more focus and accountability, because as someone with ADHD myself, I know it's very hard to stay focused. And so I've learned a lot of tricks and tools over the years. And so I share that knowledge for everyone else to elevate what they're doing, because most people don't know how to do sales right. Most people don't know how to monetize their content. Most people are too shy to have a DM strategy. I teach them to create the right sales funnels that's going to work for them in their business.
Great. Well, I am excited to get the conversation going. One of the things that we really talk about as kind of the foundation of this conversation is work used to have a longer change cycle. So things did not change so quickly, but things today are changing much, much faster. And so I would love to start with, from where you sit, what's one shift that you're noticing at work right now that people really should be paying attention to? And Roy, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. I'd almost back up and say, look, the defining curve of humanity is an exponential curve. It doesn't matter what you look at. You can look at population, urbanization, economics, professional sports, professional music. There's exponential curves everywhere. In this AI moment, we entered the elbow in 2022, and things are changing very, very rapidly in the world. As a result, there's a ton of hype. We're in the classic Gartner hype cycle right now. And at the end of the day, there's just massive leverage, right? That I think what's going to change is that there's going to be no such thing as an individual contributor. Mm-hmm. There will be an individual human, but all humans will have teams of agents that help them do what they need to do at work and get things done. And it sounds futuristic and scary to a lot of people, but it's happened before. The word calculator and the word computer were created to identify a human. People said, I am a calculator, and they went to work and summed up, columns of numbers. And I am a computer. The movie Hidden Figures, mm-hmm. They were called computers. That group of women at NASA were computers. They came and did computation. And we don't think twice about that now. There are no people who are calculators or computers anymore. Anything that's repeated and tedious, we're going to outsource to a team of agents that's very focused on what we tell it to do. Mm-hmm. I'm not so worried about we could talk about the existential stuff. I'm not particularly worried about that, but that's a different conversation. But I think it's about rapid adoption right now. And I tell people the skill they need more than any other skill at the moment is curiosity. You should be playing with all the bots and understanding how they are good and bad and what's the best way to use them. And it is not like interacting with other intelligences, which were other humans historically, and we need to adjust how we interact in that regard. But curiosity above all else. You should be experimenting. And I mean, look, the top models on the planet are free. You could pay, but you don't need to pay, because the paid model 3 months ago, that was the paid model, and that's free now. So, it's available, widely available to everyone, and everyone should be banging on it and playing with it.
Yeah. So big change. So Bobby, what about you? What is one shift that you are paying the most attention to from your point of view?
Well, I think it's the fact that the technology and the world and social media and how we live our lives and how AI is, I think humanity can't really keep up as well as we'd like them to. It requires a lot of education, a lot of support. I mean, it's just a perfect example as a parent. I'm a parent and I have kids who are teens, and even keeping up with the technology they're dealing with and being on top of that as a parent or being knowledgeable about that is very, very hard. And so I think, I remember back in the day when, internet first came along, there's people in the workplace who didn't know how to attach a file to an Outlook email, and they needed someone to help them with that. And then, 15, 20 years later on social media, someone doesn't know, how exactly do you send a DM, or how exactly do you, start a live, how do you post a reel and things like that. With AI, there's even more things. And as I've always used the analogy with you, Dana, you heard me say this, in the world of AI, I was somebody who was kind of riding a bike, and some people were walking. There was the experts who were driving fast cars or fast planes, and the majority of people are just sitting there. And so after 2 years of me using AI, I'm now hundreds of miles ahead. And the people how many people are walking? How many people are standing up to walk? Not very many. I was at a dermatology clinic the other day. A couple of years ago, and they were using analog to book their appointments. They had a book and they flipped through papers. And I was like, and I went to the dental guy. I said, "Can I offer a feedback?" And he's like, "Well, listen, I'm thinking that having your two admins book calls and appointments for this doctor service with a paper thing is really, really behind for 2020.
Yeah.
And I think you should train them on something new, like an Excel sheet or something.
Anything.
And he's like, well, they are the way they are. And look, I get it. People and humans are the way they are. But I said, look, I told him, I said, you're doing them a disservice. If you die for a horrible situation, they're out of work. They can't do anything. And also, when your clients call and they're looking to change appointment, they don't remember what it is, they can't quickly search for it. I heard them flipping pages on the phone when I was trying to change appointment. I was like, this is really bad. And he's like, you know what? You make a lot of sense. And then within about 3 months, he had trained them, and they were now using Excel, which is better than nothing. But my point is that there's going to be a huge number of people who are not going to keep up with this stuff. And on top of that, there's so much out there. Where do you choose where you want to spend your time on? And so maybe one person will say, well, I'm just going to become really amazing at PowerPoint. Or I'm going to be really, really amazing at Claude, or I'm going to be really, really amazing at, email back-end tech, because most of us can't be good at everything.
Yep.
So there's two things I see. One is the ability to choose the one thing you want to get really, really good at. For me right now, it's Claude. That's what I'm focused on, putting energy into. The second thing is, the number of people who are going to fall behind, because in the futurist world, I think that 20% will be on top of things and everyone else will be varying levels of how far behind they are. And I think that's going to be a huge challenge.
Yeah. And Luann, from your point of view, what would you add? What is one thing that you're noticing that is the biggest shift these days?
I would say, and I think this is great because I'm building on what both Roy and Bobby said, I would say organizational complexity is increasing faster than organizational capacity. And for me, it's capacity and governance, the governance of the organization. Yeah. And so you've got adopting AI, you've got, maybe it's acquiring businesses as you're scaling. Maybe you're asking geopolitics, and you're asking leaders to make decisions in environments that are becoming increasingly complex. And then also relying on operating models, governance practices, decision-making processes, going back to the Excel spreadsheets. that are designed for a much simpler time, and time when you basically also more time to make those decisions as well. So I think that to me is the biggest shift I'm noticing right now.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's so true. I would just add, I agree. I think that AI is certainly a big piece of what's happening right now. I think the curiosity, I love that, Roy, as we are stepping into that. And it again adds on to kind of what Bobby was saying. It's like, we don't have to do everything, but we do want to be doing something. And so figuring out where it is appropriate for us to be taking those steps and moving forward. But I think, Luann, you're absolutely right. Our systems are changing right now because of the things that we used to have individuals do, and now we're using our agents to do. And so being able to scale in a way, I think that's right now the biggest struggle I'm seeing in the market is people have all these new tools available to them, but in organizations, figuring out how does that really work? Like Bobby said, like, what are the priorities that we're really focusing on so that we can get our team to continue to evolve and use these things to the best of their ability, while we're still kind of figuring out what's next and what's next and what's next.
So I might challenge some of that in the sense that this is the first time in the knowledge economy where you can learn how to do anything without imposing on anyone. I mean, and honestly, I've reached a point where I don't solve any problem without talking to my bot buddies. I just fixed our HVAC system in our house by myself because I had 3, brilliant knowledge workers who I showed and they listen. It's fully multimodal. I mean, you're able to do. We've reached a point where if you don't know how to do something, there's someone who can walk you through it step by step, as long as you explain who you are and who you want them to be, right? Like, and that's weird. We don't do that in normal life. I don't start my interaction with a fellow human saying, here's who I am, here's who I need you to be. But when you do that with a bot, freaking magic, right? Like this idea of like training and doing a particular task and understanding how to do it. I don't know. I think we've reached the point where it's like, you just need to ask the right question. Or even suggest, hey, I'm not sure how to question on this. I've been asked to do this thing. I don't even know the right questions to ask. What do you think? Where should I start to learn how to do this at a peak level? And
let me just add some context, though. I mean, like, I get that because you and I and most of us are out there asking stuff. Like just last night, my daughter had trying to figure out how do I take my flip phone contacts to my new flip phone. And she figured out on YouTube and ask Claude, like that's great. But I work with all these business owners and corporate people, and they are so terrified, so unsure, have tons of doubts that not only do they not even ask for help, they don't know how to ask for help, and they don't know how to ask for help. And so particularly business owners, like, case in point, business owners, I've worked with probably 200 plus business owners in my TEDx Master Program and my TLB Club. And what percentage of them are actually using AI regularly? It is less than half. It could be 20, 30%. Mm-hmm. How many, want to or want to start? More do, but they not only do they're terrified of starting, but they also don't know how to start. And then because of all the options, a very common thing happens when there's all these things. Hey, there's Claude, there's Gemini, there's ChatGPT, there's also they move forward on nothing. And so I see people that I've coached 2 years ago saying, hey, I gave you those great insights on step-by-step basic stuff, how to do this stuff. Did you do it? Oh, I didn't do it. So there is a huge chunk of people out there that either are not doing it or don't want to admit they're not doing it. And so I see people
I think there's a massive
ask me questions and I'm like, hey, try this. Oh, and then next week, oh, I didn't do it. Why?
Yeah, and that's why I think there's a massive advantage for the young right now. The youth who are used to asking questions, they're in a question and learning phase, are going to have a huge advantage over someone who thinks they know how things work.
Which is why I'm talking to the people who are older, because I think that there's a large number who don't do stuff, and they need to learn how to do this stuff for sure. They start walking.
Yeah. And Luann, I'm curious from your point of view, how does that impact those organizations that are looking to scale?
You mean the use of AI specifically?
Yeah, the use or not use.
I think it's a critical one. It definitely has an impact, and one, from a board standpoint, again, going back to the governance and oversight, a lot of the board members don't have the AI experience or expertise. And so from a governance perspective, it's being able to ask the questions to make sure that the company is proceeding appropriately. And so if you don't have that expertise, how are you going to be able to ask the questions? So there's a dearth of knowledge there. And I think that, and then it's being able to frame it, I think Roy kind of touched on risk, but there's also opportunities. And so being able to look at it holistically and what it means across the organization, from R&D, IT to HR, cyber risk. I mean, it touches on basically it touches on every aspect across the company. So just being able to have that visibility or insight is critical.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I do want to remind the audience that we will be taking audience questions. So we have some of those coming in the chat. So let's look at a first one here. How to lead in the market, which you're not aware of, how things work in this market, like the United States. So does anybody have any thoughts on how one might tackle something like this?
Yeah, I mean, that's a perfect sample question for any of the bots, right? And say, and I do try to reinforce to people, like, at the moment, it's all about context, not content, right? So we adjust. As we're auto calibrators, right? When I talk to someone, if one of us in this conversation we're not fluent in English, this is a very different conversation. We change our tone, our cadence, vocabulary. We're constantly adjusting for the audience that we're speaking to. Bots are blind, deaf, and dumb. They don't know who they're talking to, and so they talk to the mean. They you have an IQ of 100, and they act like they have an IQ of 100. But the magic of the moment is they can be whoever you want them to be. I tell people spend a healthy amount of time, 50, maybe 80% of your time. Here's who I am: born, raised, educated, languages I speak, places I've been, blah, blah, blah. Here's who I need you to be. So, like, if this speaker is not familiar with the U.S. market, tell it who you are. I am in this market. This is what I know. This is what I have done. This is what I've achieved. I'm looking to enter the market. Here's my products, blah, blah, blah. Be an expert in cross-border transactions, blah, blah. Tell it who, I mean, that's the real magic of the moment. It can be whoever you want it to be, particularly famous people. One of the best things we ever did was he dropped our deck in and said, how would Steve Jobs pitch this? Oh my God, it was like magic. I was like, wow, that is exactly how he would pitch it. How come we didn't think of that? Well, I don't tend to think like Steve Jobs in that regard, right? Like, and you can do that with any well-known famous person, author, anyone there's plenty of content about, you can have an interaction with, right? So if Nagendra has a person that they respect and think they're great doing what they want to do, say, be them this conversation. Okay, now what would they do next? Or tell me what I should be thinking about, or what question should I be asking? That's the thing.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think AI is great to get you started and get you going in the direction and give you the high level, but I think you still need to reach out and engage, especially if you're looking at a target market, and understand, because people are going to make buying decisions, and that's personal, and that's not going to be captured in the training data. So I think that can be kind of the start of the learning funnel, but don't make it the be all end all, would be my only caveat.
Yeah. I mean, one of the best ways to lead in the market is to, the best leaders are learning, evolving, and growing all the time. And so you have to be out there, learning about AI and asking questions. You have to be out there networking with people and getting knowledge from the best people out there. You have to be asking those questions. But you also have to be starting and doing things and taking initiative, trying things out, testing it, failing. It's like the marshmallow test, right? Where, if the people who do well in the marshmallow test, if you don't know what it is, 6-year-olds do better because they build and they fail and they build and they fail and they keep innovating, whereas CEOs will plan for 30 minutes and then build something and then it doesn't work. And so the idea is to keep starting and trying. I think that if you are able to do that and ask those questions and continually work on your learning, like, that's important. Like, for me, I've learned, like, in the early days of me 20 years ago when I was a networking expert, then LinkedIn showed up and I had learned how to become an online networking expert. And now I have to understand how AI works, because I'm constantly trying to learn how to do this better. Whatever you're trying to do, always try to think about how to do it better. Otherwise, you become like Blockbuster with movies, or you become someone else that is letting go of the innovation around you that you could have actually created for yourself.
I'm waiting for Blockbuster to come back.
I still have my card.
Well, Barnes and Noble's coming back, so there you go.
I know. See, it's a full circle. But yeah, I think that just echoing a lot of what y'all have said, I think that for me, there are kind of three keys to clarity, which I talk about, which is one is research. So we're looking into things, we're using AI. Two is having conversations with people who have had real world experience. So again, we don't want to do it totally in isolation. We want to get out there. And be talking to people who have had those experiences, who are experts, have those, informational coffee chats. And then the third is we want to try things on. Like Bobby said, the knowledge out there does nothing for us if we don't start putting it into action. And so that doesn't need to mean a huge leap. It can be a tiny thing. So figure out what the smallest piece that you can actually take action on so that you can get that feedback and start learning and seeing not only the new information, but like what works for you, what's helpful for you, and then where you want to go next. So I think there are so many tools available to us now. And then really, like folks are saying, it's like, how do we then take that and put that in action? We've got another question here from John. When leadership introduces AI to increase efficiency, frontline teams often hear headcount reduction instead of task reduction. What's the best way for management to address that unspoken anxiety transparently? Luann, would you give us some insight here?
I'm laughing because I think this goes back to my days of doing change management. I think people have done generally a horrible job with change management around this. But I think, I think a lot of them, if they say this is part of the strategy, our strategy for our company is how are we going to grow? How are we going to scale? And to this point, AI can be part of that and part of that tool. It's increasing capacity. And so if you flip it on, this is increasing capacity for you to be able to focus on, the high level, the high kind of valuable things of what you're doing to help support the organization's scale. It's giving us time, and that's leading to growth. And notice there's nothing about reduction, cost savings in there at all. And so I think flipping the argument to, helping give us the capacity and helping us scale and scale more effectively, I think is the argument, our language then that the leaders should use.
Yeah. So in addition to, we've talked about some of the things that we should be doing. What are some of the mistakes, or what's one mistake that we're making right now that we feel like folks are maybe still holding on to old ways? Bobby, I'm going to start with you on this one.
I think a big piece of this is just having the honest conversation about it. And that also starts from the top down, because there are people up there at the high levels, board levels, CEOs, whatever, who are not engaging or not staying on top of things, and they're too afraid to showcase their vulnerability or their inability to keep up with some of the stuff. But I think if you can, again, a big part of this entire thing, I always talk about the human connection, but being able to be honest about it and being transparent about what you're dealing with, what you're struggling with, how your teams are struggling, creating a platform where we're going to talk to each other in an honest way, because it's hard for organizations or leaders or anyone to even act if we don't know how everyone's feeling. I remember the pandemic was kind of an interesting thing, because we spent time on Zoom calls asking how everyone's feeling. And that was one of the first times we were being quite vulnerable with each other. Now we're starting to lose a little bit of that, because we're back to the world and all that kind of stuff. But I think, to me, that's a starting point. Open up the conversation. Hey, let's have a conversation. What's the best way for us to support? Going back to the question about the anxiety, right? Being honest about the anxiety and how can we support that anxiety. And by being able to start with that conversation, we get to sense kind of how people are feeling, the good and the bad and the ugly. And then we can come up with something that makes sense for us to move forward. But I think that honest conversation, starting out that way, whether you're the leader or the organization, that to me is critical.
Luann, what would you add?
I would say I think leaders need to think of themselves. I think they've often thought of themselves as problem solvers, and switch that to thinking of themselves as architects. How are you building an organization that's sustainable for growth? Going back to the question, and making it optimal, so you're not relying on heroics of certain individuals or within the organization. And so, kind of flipping and looking at a new role to model as a leader.
Yeah, no, so great. And Roy, what would you say is a mistake that people are still holding on to or acting on in work today?
Yeah, again, I think we are entering a world that will be very, very agentic, right? That will I, as an individual contributor, will create a team of agents that do things that I don't want to do, that are tedious, that are repetitive, that can be very focused. And by the way, what's very entertaining about it is they're very human. So I'll give you an example. One of my co-founders spun up a dev team and was getting bugs like from the UX. He had all the regular roles, UX and database and blah blah blah, and he realized they didn't put a QA manager on the team. There's no one doing quality assessment at all. He adds a quality assessment person, and boom, the bugs went away. And so it's really kind of, for me, it's very entertaining. The bots are very much, that's not my job. Right? Like the classic model of in the office, like, why didn't you fix that? Well, that's not my job. I do this. Like, the bots are even more so. Like a human will kind of step in sometimes when they even though it's not their job, the bots will not do that. The bot's like, I'm a UX guy. I don't do QA, like blah, blah, blah. And so everyone's going to become a manager, and they will manage, all people will manage groups of humans and agents, and even individual contributors will have a team of agents doing their thing. It's going to be interesting.
No, I love these examples. I think, one of the things that I'm seeing so much of is this resistance to shifting your role, which that kind of notes for me. Again, this doesn't mean that, we're going to get rid of everybody who's an engineer, for example, because you're not going to be doing it anymore. It just means you need to be stepping into a space where you're thinking about things strategically. The way that we frame work with humans is really the same way that we want to be thinking about things as we evolve what those structures look like. So again, as an individual, how can I step back and start asking some of those questions? Where are there gaps? And again, our AI buddies can help us identify those if we step back and pause and ask those things. So where are our gaps? Where are we getting caught up? One of the things that I used to walk into work environments all the time was there would be a problem and people would try to fix the problem, but not take a step back and diagnose, why is this problem coming up? And so I think in all of our roles, it is taking that time to figure out, like, okay, here's something that's not working. Rather than fixing that specific thing with specific language, it's taking the time to really think about, like, okay, how do we need to set ourselves up for success? What are the things that are going to get in our way? And so rather than being task focused, which has always gotten us into trouble, I think that is increasing even more so these days, where we're not able to kind of step back and take a look at the holistic picture, which I think is the most important part for us as humans to keep remembering to do. All right, we have another audience question here. Hi from Toronto.
By the way, that's a great example of what you could get an agent to do. You could task an agent to say, look, your job is to oversee the holistic process and make sure that we're not solving the, blah, blah, blah. Again, exactly what you said. Anything that you're like, oh, we didn't do it this time, we meant to do it, blah, blah, just give that role to someone else who is not worried about that. And I mean, it's incredible in that regard.
Yeah,
anyway, sorry, go ahead.
We're going to keep adding these things to our checklist, which we no longer have to keep in our heads, and we can assign somebody else to make sure that we are doing those things. Although I had to remind Claude this morning about a few things that we knew were rules that it was not following.
It's not that good yet.
So the question here is around what you're seeing when AI is at play. As orgs scale and adopt AI, where do you see critical information fail to reach the people who need it? And what should leadership do teams do differently? Luann, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Sure. I think where do you see critical information fail to reach? I think that it's just the assumption, and I think going back to what had been said previously, not everybody is using or adopting AI in the same way, and so I think there's the tendency to think that because I'm doing it this way, other people are, and so I think it's removing those assumptions and getting out there and probably just also redesigning or optimizing the organization, the structure, how people are communicating. Because I think going back to what I said earlier in terms of the structure being in place and updated to reflect AI, has that changed the way you're communicating? Has it changed anything else to reflect kind of bringing or adapting this resource within the tool, within the corporation, within the groups, departments, across the layers, and making sure that maps out appropriately, because that might be one of the gaps that failed to get addressed.
Yeah. Bobby, what would you add to that?
I think, as always, I keep taking the human element of this because, we all know that, AI, amplifies the human, but it doesn't replace the human. And I think that if you are leveraging more human AI in the workplace, then human connection becomes a differentiator, right? So, the way to think about it is, well, hey, everything I'm automating is great. It actually buys more time for human connection. I think that's an important piece. So I would say, listen, if you guys are adopting AI and putting tech in there, then let's have a weekly check-in and just talk for an hour. It's 1 hour per week. I mean, we're investing hours into setting up the systems on Claude and ChatGPT. Why can't we invest an hour just to check in on where people are at? And that's kind of what we're doing. Dana knows we have a weekly, Claude co-working session, TLB Club, and everyone's at a different level, right? But it's good to check in to see where they're at, what they're struggling with, what's going on. And I think that adding that human conversation, whether it's in person or it's virtual, I think is really going to be very helpful to balancing the AI automation and saving time and being efficient and all that kind of stuff, while also keeping abreast of who we are and what we're going through and what we're dealing with, both good and the bad.
Yeah. Roy, would you add anything there?
No, I completely agree with everything said. Like, I mean, there's no question that the experience is going to become more valuable, right? Mm-hmm. And even the work product, we didn't stop doing things with our hands with the Industrial Revolution. In fact, handmade is a premium, and it's going to be the same in this digital age as well, right? Human made versus digitally made. We're already seeing AI slop. We say slop, not because it's bad, it's just because it wasn't human made, right? Like, so we'll constantly value the human interaction and the human work product at a different level. Mass production was great for a lot of our goods, but we still value buying handmade items, right? And that will continue.
Yeah, I think I loved your earlier point about, we've gone through some of these big technological revolutions. And again, it shifts things, but the people are still involved. Yeah. John here is asking a question that I think is a great one. So are you seeing any specific team habits that effectively prevent burnout when the pace of operational change feels constant? Roy, I know you're deep into this AI shenanigans. So is there something about this more, and the change that we can be moderating the burnout piece of?
I mean, it comes down to culture of organizations, right? I'd love to, and people have proposed, oh, great, we're all going to go to a 4 or 3 day work week, and blah, blah, blah. No, we're humans. We're not going to do that. Like there are organizations that have done it. There are many organizations that say we work 4 days, we take 3 days off, and we find that we're more productive that way. We like it that way, but it is a culture. So at the top, you got to be sensitive to what you're doing, right? If you send emails late at night and expect people to respond, or on the weekend or blah blah blah. Like, you need to enforce cultural elements that have almost nothing to do with AI, right?
Yeah.
I used to be very strict with people going on holiday. I'm like, when you go, sorry, I lived in London for a dozen years, so I say certain things funny. Vacation. If you go on vacation, I'm like, you're incommunicado. If you can't be incommunicado for a week, 2 weeks, a month, we are not a resilient organization, because if you get hit by a bus, we're screwed. So I need you to decompress, to unplug, to not be available, and that's a cultural thing. It doesn't have anything to do with AI per se. It has to do with technology.
Yeah.
It was easy to unplug when you left the office. Everything you work on is in the office. Now the office is everywhere you are, right? So you have to have a culture that says, look, I need you to decompress. I need you to unplug. I need you to be unavailable. And I need you as a manager or as a leader to build a team that's resilient without you. If you're not doing that, then we are not a resilient organization, right? Like that's bad for everybody, you included, because you're going to burn out.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, rest is part of the work, guys, right? So, I was actually away for a week at a cottage, and oftentimes when I take that break, I get clear thinking, not just about my personal life, but sometimes I have stuff about work, right? And leaders who never log off, they aren't modeling strength; they're modeling burnout for everyone who's watching.
Right.
So it's really important for us to model that behavior and be mindful of the fact that rest is part of work. And one of the things I say as a speaker is that, because I teach people how to speak, but also how to do TEDx talks, the best parts of your speeches are the silence.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing with work. The best parts of your work are the moments of quiet. And that includes quiet reflection, but also quiet nothingness elsewhere to recharge your batteries.
Yeah. Luann, as an organization, how do we help this?
Well, I guess one of the things, as I read this question, I was thinking I was helping an organization it was a large one. It was 30,000 employees, and there was a lot of change going on within that organization. And so one of the things we did was I basically made like a heat map across the organization. Here's what change is going on. Here's what's happening. And so you could kind of see the level of intensity and then prioritize it, because not everything's going to be a priority one. And then also, and this is maybe a more complex than some of these, but just something to consider is, are some of these changes, are they more aligned? So can you do them together? Does it make sense to cluster them as opposed to just layering them right on top of it? So I think, a specific habit, I was like being thoughtful about it, not just implement it because we need to implement it, but realizing that some of these are going to take a toll. And, depending upon the nature of the company, maybe there's blackout periods. Like, this is a point we're not going to implement any of these right now, to just give everybody a chance to collect their breath. And also take stock, because I think the other part of change that people overlook sometimes is not like, okay, we made this change. Is it taking effect? Is it doing what it's supposed to do? Or do we need to kind of go back and look at it again?
Yeah, I just wanted to note to John that the pace of operational change is not constant. It's increasing. The rate of change is increasing. We are on we're on an exponential curve. Like, the pace of change is accelerating. We bragged about Moore's Law for 50 years. We're doing that every 3 to 4 months now instead of 18 months. Like, the pace is not constant. The pace is increasing, and you need to manage it, and be conscious of that.
Yeah, no, agree. I think this is the reality of where we're at. And I think one of the things as individuals, as organizations, that we fall into is this reactivity. And so I do think taking those pauses where we're figuring out, okay, again, like Luann was saying, like, the changes that we've already made. So what do we learn? What do we know? Where is our time and energy best spent? This idea that we are always on, which again, I think is just exacerbating and started when we have our devices in our pockets with us wherever we are. There is a swing in that direction about being 24/7 available. If you're not on, then you're getting your bots to go work, and then you're doing those pieces. And so really thinking about where is our time and energy best spent, so that we know some things will change and we'll have to react along the way, but how are we figuring that out? I think, science really says that, like Bobby was saying, it is important for us to have downtime, to have away time. If we don't have those pockets of silence and creativity and curiosity and all of those pieces that we're talking about, it hinders us as a workforce. And so while we want employees to have time out of the goodness of our heart, because we are healthy human people, but the fact that them getting breaks also impacts the bottom line in a positive way should make this more of a no-brainer. So Roy's bringing our European rules into the United States about vacations and actually unplugging is an important one. There is something that we gain for having that time away, and that we lose for being available 24/7.
I wonder where this is going to go, though, because, I remember when I used to work in corporate 25 years ago, I had my first job at a desktop, and I went home, and that was fine. I worked long hours, but I went home. But then my second job, they gave me a laptop. And I remember getting an email from my manager at 10 o'clock at night. And she's like, where are you? She's like, I'm in bed. My husband's really mad at me. I'm like, okay, I'm sitting here at the kitchen table and my wife is getting for bed. Like, she's mad at me. What are we doing? And this is 20 years ago. And, I think, corporations they care most about profitability. And so this is going to be a difficult thing. We are spending our lives educating everybody, individuals, teams, organizations, but there's still going to be, I'm not sure, like there's going to be some people driving towards the, always on culture, just like the people who are saying you have to be in the office 5 days a week versus the hybrids or versus the virtual. And then there's other companies are going to be like, no, we believe in, we see the data, we see how burnout help is a problem. We see how I don't know. I don't know where we're going to end up. Are we going to have companies are going to cross the spectrum from insane to completely laid back with their pants down, or are we going to have a bunch of people all across, or is it going to be two kind of factions? I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but it's fascinating to see the different polls.
I was just going to add, we're going back and going back to what I said in the beginning is about like having a organizational capacity or making sure that that's built in. And I think that's, what we talk about growth, and a lot of people are just measuring revenue, but it's just like, how did you get there? And was it that you're on a solid organizational capacity, or kind of what has been alluded to is it more heroics? It's a certain group that it's heroics. And I think that goes back to the question about, AI implementation is part of it is to reduce the heroics and just make sure that people are, quality of life, quality of decision making, that's kind of keeping pace with everything that's going on.
Yeah, I think that as things evolve, it is going to be more important. I think the human element that we've been hinting at, again, how do humans work best? And so figuring out where we need to be working and how we need to be doing those things is going to continue to be a part of the culture. I wish I could be Pollyanna and say that, like Bobby said, it's like we're all a little curious as to where things will go. But what I do see is more examples of people acknowledging those moments. And I see a lot of people mid-career who are making different decisions about how they want themselves to run and able to help spread that out throughout their organizations. And so I think we're all at maybe different places at different times in our career and where we're able to influence those decisions.
I mean, look, in a capitalist market, there's always just going to be a spectrum, right? There's you can work at a place that, it's part of economic models that they have burnout in there. Like if you go to Bain, BCG, McKinsey, burnout is part of their equation. They expect you to last 2-3 years, maybe 5 if you're lucky, and then burn out. And then they need that for the whole partner structure to work. They need to go away, blah blah blah. And a lot of these things, there's a lot of legacy stuff. Law firms are very much like that, right? There will always be a spectrum, and the question is where you want to play in the market. What kind of people do you want to attract? What kind of culture do you want to have? There are cultures that are mutually reinforcing and people support each other, and there are cultures that are backstabbing and not so. I think that's going to continue. I think AI necessarily changes that. Technology overall feels like it's accelerating things, and that's true. I mean, Bob's laptop from when we first got one is 10x weaker than my iPhone at the moment, right? So that's just it's probably more than 10x. But anyway, I mean, these things just change and evolve, and you decide what culture you want to be in.
Yeah.
The other thing that comes to mind too is that we're talking about how the speed at which organizations can keep up with technology, and then there's the speed at which individuals want to keep up with AI and technology, and then I think there's the speed at which policymakers and lawmakers, because I remember watching this Senate hearing or some sort of hearing where they're talking about the Facebook, and I was like, man, you have no idea. Facebook is like 15 years ago, and you're talking about that now, and so what happens is the policies make it really difficult for people to find that balance. like, so I was talking recently about social media bans for
Mhm.
teens, because I'm a big advocate for that. And but and people don't want to make the tough decision, or they say parents should do it. And as a parent, I'm trying to, but it's hard. It's overwhelming. And so, that's a challenge. Or, when you talk about parental leave, and I know it's different in the US versus Europe and Canada. Europe is 2 years. Like, whoa, 2 years. And like, how's that work? But then, there's examples of why that works. But, or capitalism, oh, we want you back at work and to drive. So I don't know. I mean, that's another thing, there's so many pulls, right? But it would be nice if more policymakers would have the courage to try to really help at every single level, the city level, state, province, and the national level.
Yeah. But I would say one of the miracles of the moment is we take it all as given. We take it that the weekend is 2 days and the work week is 5 days. That is 100 years old.
Yeah, and totally arbitrary based on the time. Yeah.
Totally, like that the work day is 8 hours versus like blah, blah, blah. Like there are certain things dictated by the sun, Earth around the sun, but how we allocate that is a cultural decision, and we're in a constant. Within the United States, we have 50 experiments going on, and then globally, we got another, 200 experiments going on, and people need to decide how they want to live, right? At the end of the day, and you're either going to attract an audience I'm just saying, anything is given. I think one of the things about AI right now is we can ask about that. Like, how did that come about? Like, blah, blah, blah. Like, there's so much knowledge is way more accessible now than it was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, right? It's just incredible. And I think that's going to change everything. I think the younger audience looking at jobs and things is just not going to accept stuff as given because they can find out very quickly how we made these decisions and tried to make different decisions.
Yeah.
And we see that.
We have another question here about specifically, what is your take on the fractional team, CMO, CTO, sales, at the seed phase of a company? And I'm just curious, again, to kind of broaden this, as we are seeing a fractional role a lot more than we used to. I would be curious as to what your take on that is in general. Luann, you want to start us off?
Absolutely. So I think what's my take? I think it's good. I mean, I think it just depends what problem you're trying to solve. If it's, determining if it's early seed stage, I think that might be a bit early. You're just trying to determine that you have the right product for the market, not necessarily that you're trying to scale. So, depending upon what that is, maybe that's a CTO. But I think having somebody fractional and not full-time is absolutely valuable because you're probably bringing in somebody that has that experience to help you and recognizing that, having it full-time is not worthwhile to either side, but bringing in that expertise. So yeah, I'm all for it.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any additions to that?
I think it's a reflection of how people are trying to take better ownership of their lives and realize that, not every model works. And so the fractional model is working in both organizations because they're getting access to some really amazing expertise at a part-time level, but also the people, the individuals, they want to maybe just help one organization or help three if they want to work full-time. And that flexibility is great because I find that, and again, I'm not a very pro-corporate person. So like, I know that when I worked in corporate, it felt very inefficient, whether I was working in the public sector or the private sector. And so I see that the whole fractional things, to me, I like it as a more efficient way of doing things.
Yeah. I was just going to add too, if you're looking at that role coming into a full role, and so maybe differing a little bit from Bobby here, that might be a good way to test. Is there alignment there? Is there is there a cultural fit? Is this the right person for the role? So, rather than just jumping in head first, this might be a nice kind of dip your toe in sort of scenario to play out there.
Yeah, I would agree. And I also think too, organizations are at different phases and looking for different needs in those roles at the time. So when you are in the earlier stages, yeah, there might be somebody who's a specialist to get you to the next level who might not be the full-time fit. But again, by having them in there and getting a sense for that, I think it can be a great way to mutually trial those. I think that, again, what is the company culture? What is it going to become? And what are you looking for in those roles? As well as, kind of the point of view that for the individual, this can be a great opportunity for a lot of people who want more flexibility, don't necessarily want to be in a role 100% of the time, and really kind of signal their specific focus.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, Dana, you just made me think of something else. I wanted to piggyback on what you said. And I think, you hit upon something around the stages, because, even if you're big, maybe you just don't need a full one for quite some time. The requirements or the skill sets can change depending upon what stage the company is. And so you might be having someone, and because you don't have that, you have more of a contractual commitment as opposed to long-term, you can segue into somebody else that has the different skill sets you need for that stage of the organization. So I think that makes it easier too.
Yeah, I think one of the
flip it on.
So go ahead, Roy.
Flip it on its head. Like as a professional, I think everyone has to. Well, I shouldn't say everyone. In the United States, everyone's fractional. I mean, you're on an at-will contract. You can be gone in a heartbeat. And the term people spend in corporations is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. Yeah. Across the piece, from the top as a CEO, like we're seeing CEOs who are in for a year, 2 years, 3 years, like blah, blah, blah. And all the way down the organization. Like I think people need to embrace that they own their career, and how they want to allocate their time is kind of up to them. Now, the reason I hedged is that in Europe, it's much harder to let someone go. Like there's but Lloyd Banking Group, over 60% of their headcount were contract. You weren't technically full-time employee. So then the definitions start to get muddy. Like, what do you mean? Like 60% of the employees are actually not employees; they're contractors. I mean, again, there's a regulatory environment, there's societal rules and regulations. We're entering a phase where I think most people, most of the time, will be fractional in some regard, whether it's called at-will employment or called contracting in the EU or wherever. I think both sides need to sort of own and embrace that we're in a new equation, we're in a new agreement between the employed and the employer.
Yeah. But you also, I think so I was just going to say, you also raised a good point about team and culture, because if you have somebody that's fractional and you want to build it out, that's going to impact how your culture is going to be built too within your organization.
Yeah, I think it's just as general instability. I think the fact that there is so much turnover in companies today, even if you are a full-time employee, that longevity is not there. It makes it even that much more important to think about, as an organization, what are you institutionalizing? What is the information that is not dependent on that one hero who is coming in and doing those things, and making sure that information gets a little bit more structured.
Yeah.
We have one more question that I am putting up here because I think it's a little bit funny, but I also do think there is something underneath this question that is worth talking about. So if an employee uses AI to automate 50% of their daily tasks, can they work half the hours? I think there's a couple actual questions in there. Roy, you look like you want to jump on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's the exact same thing as the CEO saying. So it's whether you have a growth mindset or not. If you think that you should work half the hours and do the same amount of work, you don't have a growth mindset. Everyone should be looking at AI and thinking, look how much more we can do with the time we already spent, right? Like it's about an enhancement. Like instead of looking at it like, okay, now I can cut back and sleep. Okay, you could. That's a cultural decision, right? But the reality is the same way when the CEO, it was the other question that John asked, when the CEO says that, how do people not see themselves being replaced? It's the same here on the employee side. Well, if you look at it like I can do it in 50% of the time, you should be looking at it like I can get so much more done in the same hours instead of looking at 4 hours instead of 8. Now I can do 8 hours so much more productively. Maybe I can take a month off of work and blah, blah, blah. Like, so again, all of these rules and standards are things we decided at some point. Yeah. So I think the organizations have to take a good hard look. No one blinked an eye when I was in Europe that you took 4 to 6 weeks off every year. And the organizations worked and were resilient. And by the way, you were off. They were not U.S. vacations where, you're calling in, blah, blah, blah. You were gone. You were not allowed to talk to people who were on holiday.
Bobby, I know you.
I mean, if I can say something here, like, I mean, the short answer is yes, you can work half hour. Whether you're an employer or business owner, do you want to? Will your company allow you to? Those are things you have to think about. And then let me reframe this for you. So imagine you reduce 50% of your meetings, because meetings they take up all our time. We don't get a chance. So if we reduce 50% of your meetings, would you then spend all that time doing work in the 40 hours, or would you just not work? The truth is, we would do the work because we would do more things. And so what happens is, like, it's great to automate this stuff and take on our tasks, because then there's more time for deeper, authentic human connection. There's more time for reflection. There's more time for strategizing. There's more time that you reduce, whether you're, whether you're distracted, whether you automate a task, or whether you don't do many meetings, or whether your partner or kids aren't calling you every 10 minutes. I once worked with a guy where his wife called him every 30 minutes, like throughout the entire day, and it was, distracting to him. So, these are all things that happen. But I think for the most part, most of us want to do better. And I think, but also some of us want to design a life where we only work 4 days a week, and that's fine. If you want to do that, it's great. I've been a big believer in, managing my time. I'm certainly amplifying and creating profitability, but I'm also saving time in my life, which is fantastic. So yeah, I think there's a lot of meat layers to this question.
I would also say it's also what's being measured. Are you measuring how much time you're sitting there? Are you measuring the output? What the results are? So it's two people that are assigned the same job. One person takes 2 hours to do it, and one person can do it in 50 minutes. And so kind of a different take on the same question.
I'll post it on the LinkedIn. There was a Wall Street Journal article this past week about the messy transition from billing it to hours to billing to work product, right? So, so what are you hired for? Are you hired for your work product, or are you a punch the clock hourly worker?
Exactly.
And that's a decision on both sides.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting too. I think we'll get into some transparency of who's using AI in what ways within an organization as we start to take on more of these things. All right. We obviously could talk about this much, much longer, but since I only have a limited time, I would love each of you to share one key takeaway. If people could walk away with one thing, what do you think it would be? And while I do that, I'm going to share their LinkedIn codes of my amazing panelists. If you are not already connected with these folks, please do. They have much, much more to say. Luann, what is one takeaway that you would want folks to come with us?
I think it's just making sure that the organization builds the capability to support all the changes in the infrastructure, because that's what I think is going to ultimately drive successful organizations in the end.
Love it. Love it. And Roy, what is one thing that you think folks should take with them?
Yeah, I'll boomerang and go full circle. I think it's all about curiosity right now. It's all about asking the right questions. You don't have to hire a teacher anymore for almost any topic. You just need to be. And by the way, if you don't know how to ask the right questions, that's your question. Teach me how to ask better questions or whatever. It doesn't really matter what you want to learn or do. The access, it's all about curiosity at the moment. For me.
Curiosity, absolutely. And Bobby, what is one thing you think folks should take with them?
Well, I said this already, but they said that the more AI is doing the work, the more human connection becomes a differentiator. And I used to talk about helping people build their authority through social media, networking, TEDx talks, speaking, whatever it might be. But really now trust is a big thing you're trying to do out there. Tech gets you reach, trust gets you chosen for things to do. And so the idea is that the human thing is what you need to elevate. As AI is being amplified, right? And that's why I said, if you have more, if you're saving time with AI, great. What are you doing for connect with yourself, connect with others, connect with the world, things like that. So that's why I'm a big believer in social media, platforms. I multi-stream all these human moments. We're having a conversation here across every platform, but the content is still just me being real with you amazing people, and that to me is connection is always something that is automated, it's real. And if you are going to invest in tech and AI, which I think you should also be aware of what is the strategic human connection element that you're going to keep while you're doing that.
So much good stuff here. If you are not already connected with me, please make sure you connect. not only do I have these amazing experts that I talked to and able to bring forward, but we'll do this panel series again. So if you want to hear what's working at work from 3 amazing experts, please give me a follow and I will keep you posted on our next event. Thank you so much to my amazing panelists for showing up today as the amazing humans that they are, and for sharing just a sliver of their wonderful knowledge with us today. Thank you so much. And to everyone who attended live or is watching the replay, again, thanks to you. You are here, who we are here for. Thanks again.
Thank you, Dana.
Cheers.
Guys.